Welcome back, everybody. What's up? Today we're going to talk about ball position. In the previous 4 videos we talked about full swing, so now we're going to talk about where you put the ball when you're ready to hit it. Ball position is going to involve 2 different directions. It's going to involve where you place the ball forward and back in your stance, and it's also going to involve where you place the ball the distance away from you. So we'll talk about both of those in this video. So we all know golf is about consistency, and part of developing consistency in your golf game involves having a routine, whether it's a pre-shot routine or your warm-up routine or your practice routine, but developing some kind of consistency so you can do the same thing over and over again. Setting up properly to the golf ball is imperative for you to be able to hit it consistently well. In other words, if you're setting up with a 7-iron, which is what I have here right now, you want to be able to set up and put the ball essentially in the same location in your stance every single time to ensure that you have some level of consistency of where the ball is going to be when you deliver the club into the ball. Now, determining where to place the ball is a nuanced thing. It's not exact, and it changes essentially on every single shot. Because when we play golf, it's very rare that we have a flat lie like I have here on this driving range deck. On the golf course, you may have a slight downhill lie or an uphill lie, or a ball below your feet lie, or a ball above your feet, or maybe a combination of the two. So where you put the ball on those kinds of shots is going to be different than if you were just hitting off of a level surface like you do on the driving range. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to determine where to put the golf ball. We'll start from a neutral position, considering that the lie is flat, and then I'll show you later how to adjust for this when you do have non-flat lies. First, we'll talk about where to place the ball forward or back in your stance, and where to play each club. When I set up to the golf ball, I set up to the ball with the ball in between my feet, in the center of my body. This just gives me an idea so that I'm square in the middle and the ball is directly under me, right under my center. And then I decide my stepping depending on what club I'm hitting. This is a 7-iron, and a 7-iron you can consider to be played essentially in the middle of your stance. Maybe slightly forward, maybe slightly back, but essentially in the middle of your stance. So if I want to place the ball in the middle of my stance, I start from the middle with my feet together, and then I step equally on both sides. And this places the ball in the middle of my stance. In the other video, I had shown you that you want to have your feet slightly open. When you consider your stance, we do not consider the distance between our feet from toe to toe, but rather from heel to heel, because this is where your leg bone connects to your foot. So you want to think of this from the heel inside your heels, not inside your toes. So the middle of my stance is not here to here, it's from heel to heel. So the middle of my stance is going to be here, in between my heels. So this ball is going to be in the center of my stance, and then I take my position from there. Generally speaking, longer clubs will be more forward in your stance. Shorter clubs like wedges will be further back in your stance. 7-iron, I told you, is about the center. These are all general things, though. It's going to depend on the way you swing, your plane of attack, and many different factors. These are just general ideas. They're not to be taken or written in stone. They vary all the time. But as a general rule of thumb, the 7-iron is in the middle, the driver's in the front, wedges are in the back of your stance. So for this 7-iron, if I want to set up center and I want the ball in the middle, I step this way and step this way equally so that the ball is in my middle. If I wanted to play the ball a little bit more forward, I can adjust that, or I can play it a little bit further back by moving my feet in the same direction. So this would be playing the 7-iron a little bit further back, this would be playing a little bit further forward, and this is going to be in the middle. So if I want to set up with a wedge, I want to play the wedges further back in my stance. Because the clubs are more lofted, we can hit down on them more to get more compression, control the loft. So to get the wedge in the back, I set up in the middle again with the ball halfway in between. And then I take some step to the left and just a small step to the right. And now the ball is in the back of my stance. My wedges I play in the back of my stance just off my right heel, in my back foot. When we do this, you can see now when I set up to the ball, I have forward shaft lean on my wedge, which is good because I want the wedges to go down. if I were to set up with the wedge in front or even in the middle of my stance, you can see that the degree of the shaft lean is less. So to get forward shaft lean, we don't necessarily just push the hands forward, but rather change the ball position. As I push the ball forward, more forward in my stance, the shaft lean gets more vertical. So this is going to be more of like a driver setup where the shaft is vertical. And as I move the ball back in my stance, the shaft lean increases. But no matter where I play it, the shaft and the left arm form a straight line. So here it is in the back of my stance where I would normally play a wedge. Here's in the middle of my stance, and here's towards the front of my stance, and you can see how the shaft lean has decreased. If we were to play the wedges in the middle, oftentimes you will hit it with the shaft fairly vertical, and this you're hitting it with the maximum loft of the wedge. Oftentimes you'll find that you scoop wedge shots, or they just kind of float up in the air, they ride up the club face because you're impacting the ball like this. This is not going to be easy to control the distance on your wedges this way. To be able to control the wedges, you really need to impact them such that the hands are ahead of the ball or that you have some forward shaft lean. To ensure this, on your setup, you step with the left and then slight with the right, play the wedges off of the right heel, and you'll find that you can hit down on them. Notice that my head is in front of the ball, not behind it. And from this position, when I take a swing at it, I'm going to impact the ball like this with the hands in front of the ball. So ball position is important, especially with the wedges, to control them and then control the loft, playing the wedges off the right foot. Now the opposite is true as the clubs have less loft. As the clubs have less loft, we want to play them more towards the front of our stance. This will ensure that we do reach the ball in a more vertical shaft position to maximize the loft of the club, because this is a 4-iron, for instance. It does not have that much loft, so I definitely don't want to decrease the loft of it and have the hands in front. All of this is understanding general, like a default shot. Of course, I can play with the hands in front of the ball if I wanted to punch this under a limb, or I deliberately want to keep it low into the wind. I can definitely change the ball position, play this in the back so that I do have forward shaft lean, I decrease the loft, and this will send the ball lower. But under normal circumstances where I'm not trying to play a specialty shot, we want to play this ball more up in the front because it's a long iron, it has low loft. So we set up from the center again, and here I'll take a small step with my lead foot, and then a bigger step with the right. And now you can see that the ball is in the front of my stance. And so when I hit this ball, if I were to hit this ball, I'm going to approach it much more shallowly, in a shallower sense like this, not hitting it down as if it were a wedge like this. The longer the clubs, the more flat you want to hit it until we get to the driver where we preferably would like to hit it on the upswing. So with this 4-iron, you can see now my head is behind the ball, unlike the wedge where my head was in front of the ball, or a 7-iron, it may be on top of the ball. With the long irons, I will be much more long woods, hybrids and such. I will be much more behind the ball, and the shaft is much more vertical because the ball is in the front of my stance. So you can change ball position with every club. Just like I explained to you before, if I want to hit this lower, I will play it further back in my stance, increase the shaft lean a little bit until maybe I even want to punch it under a limb. I can play it all the way in the back of my stance where it has very little loft, and it'll come off very low like a bullet. The last setup I'll show you for forward back in the stance is going to be the longest club in the bag, the driver. To set up with my driver, I start the same, feet together in the center of the ball is in the middle of my body. And with the driver, we want to play the driver all the way in the front. We actually would like to hit the driver on the upswing and send the ball upwards and not hit down on it. Hitting down on the driver produces a lot of backspin, which decreases your distance. You essentially would like to send the ball as high as possible, knuckleballed with low spin for maximum carry, maximum distance. To accomplish this, you need to hit up on the driver, so the bottom of your swing needs to happen behind the ball so that the club is coming upwards when it hits the ball. So we want to put the ball up in the front of our stance. To do this, from our setup, from our neutral setup, we just flare the left foot out, no need to step at all, then step everything else back. Now we step behind the ball, and this is going to be my driver setup. Now you can see the ball is in the very front of my stance. If I extend my left arm, there's a straight line from my arm to the shaft, to the club head. And now when I deliver the club to this ball, I'm delivering it from behind, so it will reach its bottom somewhere through here and hit this ball on the upswing like this to send this ball into the air with low spin. Notice my body is entirely behind the ball. To set up with the driver, again, we want it in the front of our stance. One more time, set up. It's just good to start from this position with all the clubs and just get into this routine so you can have some semblance of consistency of where you're putting the ball in your stance. Flare the foot out, step back. Now you don't want your stance to be too wide. Your stance need not be wider than you can move your hips on top of your foot. This is already a little bit wide. If I were this wide, I can't really get my weight on top of my right foot, and I can't really get my weight on top of my left. I can't quite get that far. So it need not be wider than you can move your weight on top of your heels or on top of your feet. So from here, once again, we flare out, step back. Once you step back, you grab the club. And of course, we're going to have a special video, a specific video on the driver and how to swing it such when we get there. Right now I'm just talking about where to position the ball in your stance forward and back. Okay, so now you have an idea of where to place the ball forward and back in your stance and how to determine that by setting up in the middle and then stepping from side to side, depending on what club you're hitting. Now we will discuss how far away the ball needs to be from you so you can put the club on the ball. To determine where you need the ball away from you, you need to have the club in your left hand. And extend your arm fully. Stick it out there. That's going to be your maximum extension to your left hand. The furthest away that I can get this club from my head or from my body is if I stick my arm straight out at 90 degrees from my body. If I decrease this angle any, the club is closer to me until it finally reaches my foot. So this is as far away as I can have the club away from me. So this is going to be my maximum circle or my biggest swing, which is why when you see Bryson DeChambeau hitting the ball, he has his arms all the way out and he's setting up like this because he's trying to get as much extension as possible because this circle is going to be a lot bigger than this one. So maximum extension is going to be this. Now, if I'm hitting a driver, this may be desirable because I want maximum distance and I want to get really far away from the ball so I can have a big circle and a lot of time to accelerate the club. But if I'm hitting a wedge, like I have here in my hand, a sand wedge, I don't necessarily want maximum extension. I want maximum control, and distance is not such a big issue. So if I'm hitting a wedge, I wouldn't necessarily want maximum extension. I wouldn't necessarily want to set up to the ball like this. Although this is probably going to be the furthest that I can hit it, you can see that I'm very far away from the ball. To get to the ball, I get to my maximum extension, I bend at the hips, I get in my posture until I get to the ground. I just wouldn't necessarily want to hit my wedge like that because I could probably hit it very far, but it's not going to be very accurate. I like to hit my wedges, I choke them down so I can get a lot of control, and I let my arms are very close to my body. My angle is not straight out, but very low, the lowest that it will be. So my sand wedge here, I would hit from this, and then we bend at the waist. My arm is fully extended. I bend at the waist. Notice my left foot is back. I'm on my right heel, or my right foot, and I bend at the waist, allowing my arms to fall down and see where that hits the ground. That's where I need the ball. So I will set up such that I'm at the ball there. And I know when I set up there, when I take my swing and my arm is extended, it's going to put the club at that point in the middle of the club face. I don't necessarily want to be reaching for the ball, and I don't want to be so close that I'm cramped that I have to crunch my arms in order to not hit the ground. I want to be able to fully extend my left arm through the ball. So I extend my left arm, and I also rotate slightly open to the target because we will be slightly open at impact. So I slightly open to the target, extend my left arm, and reach down and find out where that is when I bend at the ball. When I have the exact angle that I want to hit it, which is going to be about right here for most short irons, bend and find out where that is. That's where I want the ball. From that position, I take my stance. I get my distance away from the ball. Here's a 7-iron. Again, I could have maximum extension, but this is not typically where I'm going to play a 7-iron. It still is a scoring club. So I'm going to drop it down somewhere around in here. And then I bend down to the ball. and I find out and I put this in the center of the club. You see that's a little bit inside, so I'll step a little bit closer until I can get it right in the middle of the club head. That feels good to me. I feel like I can get on the ball there, my arms extended, and then from here I take my stance. Here's my 4-iron. This one I'm going to have a little bit more distance. I'm going to need a little bit more distance off of this club, so I'm not going to hold it very low like a small shot. I'll hold it a little bit higher, maybe not maximum extension, but a little less. And then I'll get away from it, bend down, see where it hits the ground, try again, come into the ball. That's pretty close there. So I would want to be about that far away from the ball. I judge how far my face is away from the ball and my left shoulder. Notice my left arm is fully extended there. So I know when I fully extend my left arm, it's going to be in the middle of the ball. So I see that's the distance I need. I take my stance from that position. My arms are extended, I go down. Another way to determine where to put the ball in your stance or how far to put the ball away from you, especially when you're on a golf course and there are not many flat lies on the golf course. Most of the shots you hit, the ball will be slightly above your feet, below your feet, and so on and so forth. You're not going to be on a perfectly flat lie basically ever. So how do you determine, if you're always practicing on the driving range where it is flat, how do you determine on course where to put the ball? You can do this by taking your practice swings. Here I'm going to take a practice swing with the 7-iron. Let's say I'm on this slope. I check out my target. I line up with my target. So my target's this way. I line up with the target just to the inside of the ball, and I'm taking a practice swing. And I'm going to take some relaxed swings and allowing myself to just catch the dirt, just to see where the club is hitting the dirt. So it's hitting the dirt here. So I need the ball right there. I'll show you from this side so you can see this. I'll take some swings here, take my stance, and I'll just start swinging the club back and forth. So I can tell that I'm hitting the ground about right here. So I want to put the ball at the beginning of my divot so I can catch the ball first and then the ground. So wherever the club hits the ground, that's where I want the ball. Again. So I can see that I'm hitting the ground right there. It's starting to enter the ground and then my divot goes that way. So I need the ball there in my stance for this particular lie. Using this on course is very helpful, especially when you're on downhill lies, uphill lies. Just taking a few small swings. You don't even have to take maximum swings. They can be very relaxed. You're just trying to see where the club bottoms out on that particular lie with a comfortable swing so that you can put the ball there when you're on the course. Wherever the club bottoms out, put the ball there and you'll find that you'll hit better shots. I'm going to demonstrate the same idea to you here on this this is a severe downhill lie. If I had to hit a ball like this, it's already going to be somewhat difficult. When you're hitting shots on severe lies, already note that you're going to have to take a totally different approach to hitting the ball than you would normally if it were flat. On this type of lie, I'm going to have to take more club than I normally would because I want to swing with less energy and make sure and prioritize contact, not power. I want to make sure to hit the ball solid. At any rate, I want to know where to put the ball. So let's say my ball is here on this slope and I want to know where to put it in my stance. Typically on a downhill lie like this, you're going to have to play the ball further back in your stance because the ground is higher behind you, so your club is going to hit the ground a lot sooner than it would if it were flat. On a lie like this, you have to just get comfortable. You're no longer going to be able to stand with your normal stance. On a lie like this, typically my left foot is very much further back. The idea is get comfortable and balanced. It doesn't matter how you have to stand, but you need to be able to have balance and be able to connect with the ground. So on this type of a lie, I would have to stand something like this, and I'm going to choke the club down also because the ground is also, not only is it downhill this way, but the ground is also uphill towards me. The ball is above my feet, so I'm going to have to choke the club down a little bit. And I'm just going to take some swings here and just kind of see what happens. I'm going to try to get comfortable on my stance just to feel out this ground. And you can see when I take a swing there that my wedge is definitely bottoming out here and the divot's extending to here. So I want to get that ball right there in my stance, which is almost in the back of my stance. When I set up to it, I want to set up to it in the same way, and that way when I take my swing, I know that I'm naturally going to bottom out the club at that same point. You can use this on any type of lie. So when you're taking your practice swings are not only to loosen yourself up, adjust yourself to the weight of the club, but also to determine, especially on slanted lies, where the club is bottoming out so you can determine where to place the ball in your stance. Hope this helps everybody. See you next time.